Spells and Blood Part 1. Chapter 1. The Enemy Heir. The battlefield still smoked. Bodies of witches lay scattered across the scorched earth, some burned, some broken. The sky was stained red from the fires that had only just died. Eric stood at the edge of the ruins, his black coat torn, his hands streaked with ash and blood. The Ashbane coven had won. But not without cost. He turned as one of his men approached, dragging a prisoner behind him, a girl no older than 20, her wrists bound in iron, her red hair tangled and matted with soot. She was hiding in the ruins, the soldier growled. Says her name is Rosamund. Eric's eyes narrowed. Rosamund. He stepped closer. Even bruised and bloodied, she held her head high. Her chin lifted. Her eyes locked on his without fear. I expected the Thornfire heir to look more threatening, Eric muttered. And I expected the Ashbane leader to have a soul, she snapped. He almost smiled. Almost. You led the attack that killed my brother, she said, voice shaking with rage. Go on. Kill me. Make me your trophy. Eric studied her. Slowly. Carefully. The war between their covens had lasted a generation. Fire against shadow. Curse against curse. And now, standing before him was the last living heir of the Thornfires. He raised his hand. His soldiers waited for the signal to finish it. But he didn't speak. He looked into Rosamund's eyes and saw something else there. Not just hatred. Something sharp. Intelligent. Dangerous. No, he said. The soldiers hesitated. Eric turned to them, voice low but commanding. Take her back to the stronghold. Prepare a binding circle. What for? One asked. Eric's answer was quiet. Final. I'm not going to kill her, he said. I'm going to marry her. Chapter 2. The Binding Circle. The silence was deafening. Eric's soldiers looked at one another as if they hadn't heard correctly. Marry her? The enemy heir? The witch they were supposed to execute. Do it, Eric said again, his voice like steel scraping stone. Bind her. Now. Rosamund's expression didn't flinch, but her fists clenched at her sides. You think chaining me to your coven with vows will break me? You've already tried fire. What's next? Flowers and blackmail. Eric didn't answer. He simply turned and walked toward the waiting horses, his long black coat billowing behind him. Rosamund was yanked forward, but this time, she didn't fight. Not physically. Instead, she watched him. Watched the man who had just killed half her kin. The man who now claimed her not as a prisoner, but as a wife. Her skin crawled. The fortress rose like a wound carved from black stone, perched on a cliff that overlooked a dead forest. Magic clung to the walls like fog, thick and bitter. Rosamund had seen many things in her short life: coven rituals under blood moons, spell-forged weapons, war councils whispered over cauldrons. But she had never seen this. Never walked into the heart of her enemy's power and lived to tell of it. As she was dragged through the halls, witches in Ashbane colors stopped to stare. Some whispered. Some glared. Others laughed. She's the Thornfire girl, one hissed. She'll kill him in his sleep, another muttered. Maybe that's what he wants, someone else said. Rosamund kept her chin up. Let them stare. Let them talk. She was no one's trophy. They brought her to the ritual chamber at dusk. The room was circular, carved with old runes that pulsed faintly with red light. At the center, a binding circle was drawn in ash and iron. Black candles lined the edges. The air tasted of smoke and old oaths. Eric stood waiting, dressed in a high-collared black tunic, a single silver ring glinting on his finger. The look in his eyes was unreadable. You're serious about this, Rosamund said. I don't do things halfway, he replied. Why me? You're alive. And useful. Charming, she muttered. Is that your marriage vow? Eric stepped forward, holding out a small blade. We both bleed. We both bind. That's how it works. You expect me to go along with this? I expect you to survive, he said. Your coven is shattered. You have no allies. No sanctuary. Marrying me keeps you alive. She stared at the blade. At the circle. At the man who had torn her world apart. And yet, there was something in his voice. Not kindness. Not remorse. But conviction. As if this wasn't about revenge at all. As if he believed this was the only way forward. Rosamund took the blade and cut her palm, slow, deliberate. Then tossed it at his feet. There. My blood. Your move. Eric followed suit, cutting his own hand and stepping into the circle. The flames from the candles flickered wildly as he spoke the ritual words. Bound not by love. Bound not by choice. But by blood, and by oath, and by the war we end together. Rosamund echoed the words, her voice trembling only slightly. As their blood touched the ash line, a flare of crimson light surged between them, hot and violent. For a second they both gasped, like air had been ripped from their lungs. Then it was over. The bond had formed. Not love. Not trust. But something older. Something unbreakable. Rosamund stood in the room they'd locked her in. Not a cell. Not quite comfort either. A guarded space in the western tower. She stared out the window at the moonlit ruins below, thinking of her coven. Her mother. The lives lost. And the man who now wore her oath like a crown. She didn't know what he really wanted. But she knew this. She would find a way to take him down from within. Even if it meant playing the perfect bride. Chapter 3: The Thornfire Bride. The knock came just before sunrise. 3 hard raps against the heavy oak door of Rosamund's tower room. She was already awake, standing barefoot by the hearth, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of bitter leaf tea she hadn't touched. When the door creaked open, it wasn't a guard or a servant. It was him. Eric. She didn't speak, but the hatred in her gaze was a weapon sharpened by silence. He stepped in like he owned the world, his tone cool as he said, "You'll need a formal dress. The council meets at first bell." Rosamund set the cup down, slowly, deliberately. "Are we parading me like a pet, or just making sure your coven sees your trophy sparkles?" Eric didn't flinch. "They need to see you're not their enemy anymore." "I am their enemy," she snapped. "I'm a Thornfire witch." "Or did you think binding me would burn that away?" He moved closer. Not threatening, just steady, like stone. "You're whatever you choose to be next." For a moment, neither of them said anything. A flicker of something passed between them. Not softness. Not yet. But recognition. 2 people who had lost more than they were willing to show. Then he turned and dropped something onto the nearby chair. A deep green gown embroidered with black runes. Elegant. Regal. A witch queen's dress. "I don't need your favors," she muttered. "It's not a favor," Eric said as he walked out. "It's armor." The room reeked of power and polished stone. Tall stained glass windows filtered light in eerie red and gray tones. The walls were lined with tapestries showing coven victories, all of them stained with Thornfire blood. Rosamund stood at Eric's side before the full council, 12 seated witches in ceremonial black, their gazes sharp enough to cut bone. Whispers passed between them like hissing smoke. "The Thornfire witch? Is this madness? Does he think marriage will fix the feud?" Eric raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. "She is my bride," he said. "By oath and right." "She's also our enemy," said Lady Varella, an elder whose voice was laced with venom. "You lost your brother to her coven. And now you share your bed with its heir?" Eric's jaw tightened. "The war cost us all. But if it continues, it will end us. You want vengeance. I want survival." Rosamund stepped forward, uninvited. Her voice rang out, cold and clear. "I didn't choose this bond. I'd have gladly died with my people rather than wear your mark." A few council members smirked at that. "But here I am," she went on. "And if you think I'll kneel or cower, you've misjudged both me and my coven's blood." Even Eric turned slightly at that. Lady Varella narrowed her eyes. "Bold words from a prisoner." "I'm a prisoner only until I choose not to be," Rosamund said. "Remember that." The room held its breath. Then Eric spoke again. "Enough. She's here. She's bound. And I will hear no talk of undoing the bond." He looked at Rosamund. "Come. There's something you should see." They descended beneath the stronghold, through a spiral staircase that opened into a circular vault lined with thousands of names carved in black stone. The air was cool, heavy, magical. "This is where we keep the list of every Ashbane killed in the war," Eric said. "Each name etched by spellfire. One for every death." Rosamund turned slowly, her gaze moving across the curved wall. Hundreds of Thornfire spells had left these marks. Her own mother's name was likely on a similar wall somewhere deep beneath Thornfire Keep. "Why show me this?" she asked. "So you understand what you're up against." Rosamund's voice dropped. "You think this wall frightens me?" "No," Eric said. "I think it explains me." She looked at him, really looked at him. Not the warlord. Not the cold coven leader. But the man raised in the ashes of vengeance. She hated what that stirred in her. "I won't be your pawn," she said. Eric looked at her, his voice low. "Good. I don't want pawns. I want someone who can help me stop the killing. Or burn everything down trying." Rosamund couldn't sleep. The bond ached, a pulse just under her skin, a phantom thread connecting her to him. Not love. Not yet. But something binding. Living. She rose and returned to the dress Eric had given her. In the sleeve's inner hem, something was sewn in. A sigil. Not Ashbane. Not Thornfire. Bloodcourt. A vampire mark. Old. Hidden. Burned into the threadwork with a spell. Rosamund's blood ran cold. Someone inside the Ashbane stronghold was working with vampires. And they had stitched their mark into her wedding gown. Chapter 4. The Mark in the Thread. Rosamund sat in silence for nearly an hour, the dress spread across her bed like a body waiting to be examined. Her fingers hovered above the vampire sigil sewn into the inner hem, a half-moon bite circled in runic script. Not visible from the outside. Not accidental. It pulsed faintly with magic, old and clever. Whoever had stitched it there had done so with intention. And precision. She whispered a soft spell of revealing. The air shimmered. The thread turned crimson. She jerked her hand back, heart pounding. Vampire sigils carried more than meaning. This one was listening. A spy mark. A listener thread, enchanted to pass secrets back to its maker. How long had she worn it? What had it heard? She looked around her room, walls made of black stone, enchanted against scrying, yes, but not against her own clothing. The room suddenly felt too small. Too exposed. She grabbed the gown, tore the hem open, and burned the enchanted thread with a flash of flame from her fingertips. The sigil hissed as it died. Smoke curled upward. she whispered. Not tonight. Rosamund moved quickly, barefoot and silent, wrapping herself in a heavy cloak. The stone corridors were dark at this hour, only lit by slow-burning witchlights that flickered blue above iron sconces. She knew it was foolish to wander the stronghold alone, but this couldn't wait. She needed to know who gave her the dress. Someone in Eric's inner circle was working with the Blood Court. As she turned a corner near the western watchtower, a voice stopped her cold. You're either brave or stupid, Eric. She turned slowly. He was leaning in the shadows, arms folded, as if he'd been waiting for her. I needed air, she lied, voice even. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable in the dark. Or perhaps you found something. Her breath caught for a beat. He knew. I found a sigil, she said. No games now. In the gown you gave me. It wasn't yours. It was vampire crafted. Eric's jaw flexed, just slightly. Where? In the hem, she replied. It was enchanted. Listening. He nodded once. I had the dress made by our seamstress. I didn't check it. Rosamund studied his face. You swear it wasn't you? If I were working with the Blood Court, Eric said, voice low, you'd be dead already. Fair enough. He gestured for her to follow. Come. There's something I want to show you. They entered a hidden passage behind the grand hall, descending through a winding stair that led to a door made of tangled branches frozen in iron. Eric placed his hand on the seal, whispering an unlocking spell only a coven leader could use. The door creaked open. Beyond it was a forgotten chamber. Cracked stone pillars. Ivy clinging to ancient walls. At the center, a broken throne of black wood and bone. What is this place? Rosamund asked softly. It's called the Hall of Thorns, Eric said. It was built by the first leaders of both our covens. Together. Before the feud. Before the fire. She blinked. You're telling me Ashbane and Thornfire were allies? More than allies, Eric said. They were lovers. Bonded by blood and spell. They built a pact to stand against the rising Blood Court, centuries ago. Rosamund walked slowly through the chamber, brushing her fingers over the etched runes on the wall. The symbols were old Thornfire script, ones only a few still remembered how to read. She whispered, Our flame is our bond. Our bond is our power. Eric glanced at her. You can read them? My mother taught me, before the war made such things dangerous. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of it settling between them. Why hide this room? Rosamund asked. Because truth is dangerous, Eric said. And the Blood Court doesn't want anyone remembering that once witches were united. Rosamund returned alone. Eric had left her at the door, promising to investigate the sigil with his security circle. She sat at her window, staring out into the dark hills beyond the fortress. Everything was shifting too fast. Enemies were not enemies. History had been rewritten. And Eric. She hated him. And yet she didn't. Because something in his voice, in that secret chamber, didn't sound like a lie. She touched the binding mark on her wrist. It was warm again. Not burning. Not flaring. Just alive. And in that moment she made a quiet vow to herself. She would find out who had placed that sigil in her gown. She would unravel the Blood Court's secrets. And if Eric proved to be part of the game, she'd burn him down from within. Chapter 5: The Council Below. The seamstress was dead. Rosamund learned it an hour after dawn. The information came not from Eric, but from a whispering guard outside her door, too careless with his gossip. A knife to the heart. Found in her workroom. No signs of struggle. No evidence left behind. Just a locked door, and a silenced witness. She paced the tower chamber like a caged animal. This wasn't just a warning. It was a message. Someone inside the Ashbane stronghold had discovered she knew about the sigil, and acted fast to cover their tracks. But how deep did the rot go? She needed answers. And if Eric wouldn't give them willingly, she'd rip them out of someone. The chamber was all stone and shadow. Maps lined the walls, marked with glowing sigils that pulsed gently in magical ink. A wide obsidian table stood at the center, surrounded by 3 figures in Ashbane robes. Eric stood at the head. He didn't look surprised when Rosamund pushed the doors open without knocking. "You could have told me," she said, walking toward the table, fire in her voice. "She's dead." The seamstress. The others in the room stiffened. Eric exhaled slowly. "I was going to tell you. Was it your order?" she asked. One of the others, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like frozen glass, spoke before he could. "Watch your tone, Thornfire." Rosamund turned gaze hard. "And who are you?" "Another one of his loyal hounds?" "Vanya," the woman said. "Commander of Internal Security. And I don't take threats from half-bonded spies." "Enough," Eric said sharply. "We're on the same side, unless someone here proves otherwise." Rosamund stepped forward, placing a folded scrap of burned fabric onto the table. The fragment of the sigil. "This was sewn into the hem of the gown I wore to the council." A vampire listener thread. "She made it. She'd die. And someone in this room wants me quiet." Silence. Then Eric looked at Vanya. "I gave the order for her to make the dress. You approved it." Vanya's eyes narrowed. "And I assigned her guards. 2 of them are missing." Eric stiffened. "Since when?" "Since 3 hours before her body was found." The tension in the room thickened like smoke. Rosamund watched them both. "So either she worked for the Blood Court, or someone killed her and wants us to think she did." Eric stared at the sigil fragment, his jaw tight. "I've kept this coven alive through a decade of war," he said. "But I've never seen the Blood Court this close. This clever." Rosamund crossed her arms. "Then it's time we start playing smarter." Vanya looked at her, not quite hostile now. Almost curious. Eric nodded slowly. "Then we begin by tracking the listener magic back to its source." In a chamber deep beneath the fortress, Vanya laid out the tools: a basin of obsidian water, silver powder, an enchanted needle, and a drop of Rosamund's blood. "You're sure you want to do this?" Vanya asked. Rosamund didn't hesitate. "Do it." Vanya pricked Rosamund's finger and dropped the blood into the bowl. Then she began to chant in Old Ashbane, her voice rising and falling like wind over graves. The surface of the water shimmered, then showed a flickering vision. A figure cloaked in black robes. Hands gloved. No face visible. Holding the dress. Whispering over the sigil. A voice came through, warped and distant. "The Thornfire girl will carry the thread. Let the council hear what they hide. Let the bride bring us war." The vision shattered. Rosamund reeled back, clutching her temples. It felt like someone had screamed directly into her brain. Eric caught her by the shoulders. "What did you see?" She blinked. "I saw them. I heard them." "Who?" She looked up, breathing hard. "The Blood Court. They're listening. Not to kill us. Not yet. They want us to destroy each other. And I think they've done it before." Back in her chamber, Rosamund sat at the window again, hair unbound, skin pale from the spell work. Eric stood nearby, silent. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "Why marry me?" "Really?" Eric hesitated. Then, "Because the war needed to break. And you were the one thing no one could ignore. A symbol of hate. Or change." She looked at him. You chose the latter. I chose survival. She nodded. Same. A long pause. Then Rosamund rose and walked toward the bed. Before lying down, she paused, glancing over her shoulder. If I find out you're playing me. Eric's eyes met hers, cold and unreadable. I'd expect nothing less than fire. Chapter 6. The Memory That Burned. The dream didn't feel like a dream. It started in fire. Rosamund stood in a forest of blackened trees, the ground still smoking beneath her feet. Above her, the sky was the color of split-open fruit, red and wet and full of thunder. She turned slowly. There, in the clearing ahead, two witches stood facing each other. Both wore the ceremonial robes of high coven leaders, one in Ashbane silver, the other in Thornfire crimson. Between them, a stone altar. Cracked. Blood-stained. Ancient. They were arguing. The words weren't clear at first, warp-like sound underwater, but then the wind shifted and Rosamund could hear them. You broke the pact, Elira, the Ashbane woman said. You summoned blood magic without consent. I did what I had to, said the Thornfire witch, Elira. The vampires were watching. Listening. Someone from your side told them where our children were. The Ashbane leader's face twisted. Lies. Then where are they, Mira? Elira's voice cracked. Where are the children? Lightning flashed. The altar pulsed with a faint red glow. They have already taken too much from us, Elira said. We should be fighting them, not each other. The vision trembled, warping again. Rosamund reached toward the scene, and suddenly flames engulfed her hand. She screamed. And woke. She bolted upright in bed, heart racing, skin drenched in sweat. The binding mark on her wrist glowed faintly red. Eric was already in the room. She didn't know how he always knew. But he did. What did you see? He asked. She stared at him, shaking. Two witches. Elira and Mira. Thornfire and Ashbane leaders from the First War. Eric frowned. Those names are only found in the oldest spellbooks. What did they say? That there was a betrayal. That the Blood Court took something, someone, and blamed it on the witches. Eric moved closer, brow furrowed. There were rumors, whispers that the war between our covens was started by a lie. But no one knew the truth. I think I just saw it, Rosamund whispered. Like a memory that wasn't mine. The altar. It was covered in blood magic. Someone used it to summon something. Eric's gaze sharpened. You've been marked by old magic. Bound through blood and oath. The bond between us might be awakening things buried in your bloodline. She stood pacing. What if the Blood Court did this? She asked. What if they planted the lie centuries ago, started the war between our covens, just to keep us too busy fighting each other to stop them? Eric didn't answer at first. Then we've been fighting a war they already won. Eric led her to the lowest level of the stronghold, a massive underground chamber lined with spell-protected scrolls and grimoire shelves older than the war itself. Only coven leaders were allowed down here. Rosamund should not have been. I'm risking a lot, Eric said. Letting you see this. She gave him a look. You married me. I think we're past risking a lot. He smirked. Just slightly. They reached a sealed archive marked with fire runes and bloodline glyphs. Eric pressed his palm to the lock, murmured a word in the lost tongue, and the vault door creaked open. Inside, scrolls wrapped in dragonhide. Tomes bound in witchbone. Dusty, ancient, and powerful. Eric pulled out one scroll and laid it open. This is the only known record of the first blood pact between our covens, he said. The agreement to fight the Blood Court as one. Rosamund scanned the pages. The writing shimmered faintly, revealing a third sigil beside Ashbane and Thornfire. What is that? She asked. Eric hesitated. That's the symbol of the shadow binding. A magical seal used to suppress joint power. To keep the truth buried. Rosamund's stomach dropped. They sealed it? She said. They knew the blood court was behind it. And they buried the evidence? Eric nodded. To keep their people from tearing themselves apart. Or, Rosamund said darkly, they were threatened into silence. Back in her room, Rosamund sat beside the hearth, the scrolls still echoing in her mind. Eric stood near the doorway, watching her with that same unreadable look. You don't trust me, he said softly. I don't trust anyone, she replied. He didn't argue. But I'll fight beside you, she added after a beat. If we're going to expose the blood court, we'll need more than secrets and scrolls. We'll need proof. People. Allies. I've already summoned someone, Eric said. A witch who left the coven after the last rebellion. She knows things we don't. She'll be here by midnight. Rosamund arched a brow. You trust her? No, he said. I trust her hatred for the blood court. That, at least, was something. As he turned to leave, Rosamund spoke again. Eric? He paused. If we're wrong, if this ends with both of us dead, what will you regret? He turned his head slightly. Just enough for her to see the shadow in his eyes. Not killing you when I had the chance. Then he was gone. And for the first time since the war began. Rosamund wasn't sure whether he was joking. Chapter 7: The Witch Who Walked Away. The knock came just before midnight. Not rushed. Not uncertain. 3 slow, precise taps. Eric opened the fortress gate himself. A figure stepped through the mist, tall, cloaked, with a shadowed hood and the scent of iron and wildflowers trailing behind her. Still paranoid, I see, the woman said, pulling back her hood. Rosamund stood at the top of the stairs, watching from the shadows. The woman's hair was silver-streaked black. Her eyes mismatched, one gold, one pale green. Her aura radiated magic, but not like the others in the fortress. It was old, feral, unbound. This was not a woman who followed rules. Eric gave a tight nod. You came. Curiosity dragged me, she said. Not loyalty. He stepped aside to let her in. Same as always, then. Rosamund stepped in just as the woman took a seat at the war table and poured herself a glass of blackroot wine without asking. Eric gestured toward her. Rosamund, this is Marin. Former Ashbane, former spy, and former traitor, depending who you ask. Rosamund didn't blink. What does she call herself? Marin grinned. Free. Rosamund stepped forward. Did you really walk away from both covens? I walked away from a war neither side understood, Marin replied, swirling the wine. And from people too blind to see who was lighting the fire beneath them. Meaning the blood court? Rosamund asked. Marin raised her glass. Meaning always the blood court. Marin unrolled an old, weather-stained map across the table. She pointed to a mark in the center of the disputed lands, the burned stretch of territory between Thornfire and Ashbane. It started here, she said. A village called Red Hollow. It was neutral ground. Shared between covens, protected by ancient wards. Rosamund frowned. I've heard of it. It was wiped out before I was born. No survivors. Marin nodded. Because the Blood Court sent a strike force, disguised as Ashbane witches. They slaughtered everyone. Then leaked a forged spell book to Thornfire, showing false proof of Ashbane involvement. Eric's jaw tightened. I've seen that book. It's in the archives. Of course it is, Marin said. Because they wanted it to be found. Rosamund stepped closer to the map. So every battle that followed, Every death. Marin nodded. Engineered. Directed. Fed. Like blood to a flame. She pulled out a second scroll, this one bearing the sigil Rosamund had found in her dress. This mark didn't exist before the Red Hollow massacre, Marin said. It was created after. A vampire control brand. A way to tag people, places, or even clothing with eavesdropping spells. Rosamund felt cold. So we've been manipulated for decades, she whispered. And no one knew. Marin raised a brow. Oh, some knew. But they were killed. Or discredited. Or bought. Eric stood silent for a long time. Then, we can't keep this hidden. No, Marin agreed. But if you reveal it too soon, your own people will call you traitors. They'll think it's Thornfire trickery, or worse, a vampire lie. Rosamund crossed her arms. Then what do you suggest? Marin looked between them. You need to show them what the Blood Court's been doing. Not tell them. Show them something undeniable. Something they can't ignore. Like what? Eric asked. Marin leaned forward, eyes gleaming. There's a vampire safe house in the marshes north of the border. Hidden. Protected. Used to house captured witches, forge evidence, and train spies. She paused. They have a prisoner there. Someone from your side, Rosamund. Someone they've kept alive to extract spells. If you rescue her, you'll bring back not just proof, you'll bring back a victim. A living story they can't deny. Rosamund stared at her. You're sure? I broke into that place once, Marin said. Didn't get out with the girl. Barely got out myself. Eric glanced at Rosamund. If this is true, we go together, Rosamund said. If we're to stand in front of our covens and say we're no longer enemies, we need to start acting like it. Marin raised her glass again. Cheers to doomed plans and even worse alliances. Rosamund sat on the stone balcony, alone, watching fog creep across the fields beyond the stronghold. Eric joined her quietly, holding 2 cups of hot nettle brew. He handed her one without a word. She took it. You believe her? She asked. I believe she's dangerous enough to lie and tell the truth at the same time. Rosamund sipped the brew. I saw something in a dream, she said. 2 witches, Elira and Mira. Our ancestors, maybe? They fought over betrayal. Over children taken. It was real. Eric was quiet for a long time. Then, if we fail to prove the truth, we'll die as traitors. Rosamund looked at him. If we succeed, we'll change the world. Another long pause. Then Eric looked at her sideways. If I die on this mission, I expect you to at least avenge me. Rosamund smirked. Only if I'm in the mood. Their eyes met. The tension that had once been pure hatred now flickered into something else. Not trust, but understanding. Chapter 8. Into the Marsh of Teeth. The marshland stank of decay and secrets. Thick fog clung to the roots of twisted willow trees. Black water shimmered with unnatural stillness. And above the surface, something unseen occasionally clicked, like bone against bone, far too rhythmically to be wind. Rosamund tightened her cloak and cast a soft glow from her palm to light their way. She hated marshes. They held memories of old magic gone wrong, of witches who whispered to the dead, and of creatures even vampires avoided. I don't like this, she muttered. Eric, walking beside her in silent precision, didn't look back. That makes 2 of us. Behind them, Marin moved like a shadow, her boots leaving no imprint in the wet mud. She was chewing dried root bark and humming some forgotten lullaby that made Rosamund's skin crawl. Stop that, Rosamund snapped. Marin just smirked. Marshes hummed back. I'm being polite. Their goal was simple: reach the hidden vampire safe house, infiltrate its wards, and rescue the captive witch. According to Marin, the girl had been taken over a year ago, thought dead by Thornfire. She was once part of Rosamund's training circle. Her name was Eileen. A talented seer. A little too outspoken. A little too brave. And now, maybe, the key to proving the Blood Court's involvement in the witch war. We get in, Eric said, crouching by the edge of a low hill. Grab her. Get out. Quiet. You. Rosamund scoffed. Doing anything quietly is a surprise. He gave her a look. Just don't set the trees on fire again. She flushed, remembering the last time she'd lost control in battle. The trees had burned for 3 days. It had been effective, but messy. They saw it through the mist, a cluster of ancient stone ruins, sunken into the marsh like forgotten bones. Moss covered the arches, and thick vines slithered along the broken columns like they were alive. Rosamund could already feel the magic, cold and wrong. It crawled up her spine like wet silk. Vampire warding, she whispered. They've layered glamour, repulsion, and memory fog. Eric nodded. Can you cut through it? Alone, no. With you, yes. Marin raised a brow. You two gonna hold hands and sing, or are we casting this thing? Rosamund ignored her and took Eric's hand. His skin was cool, calloused, steady. Together they whispered the spell. Thread to thread cut the weave. Blood to blood, let truth breathe. Shadow's skin, now come undone. By spell's light, and by the sun. The fog around the ruins hissed and parted. The safe house shimmered into full view, a squat fortress sunk into the swamp, guarded by sigil stones that now glowed angry red. Time to move, Eric said. They slipped inside like phantoms. The halls were tight, half collapsed, dripping with moisture. The scent of iron and rot thickened the deeper they went. Torches burned with pale green fire, vampire flame, cold and constant. They passed holding cells, most empty. A few still contained bones. One had a half-melted mirror rune etched on the wall, pulsing faintly. Marin spat at it. Memory leech, she muttered. They feed on thoughts. Rosamund gritted her teeth. At last, they reached a final chamber, sealed with thick iron doors etched in wards. Inside, a girl, slumped in chains. Eileen. Pale. Barely breathing. But alive. Rosamund rushed forward. It's her. Marin moved to the sigils. Give me a minute. Eric stood watch near the door, eyes scanning the dark. The moment Rosamund touched Eileen's arm, the girl flinched. Her eyes opened, wild, golden, filled with terror. No, she whispered. You're not real. This is a trick. They send you to test me. It's me, Rosamund said gently. It's Rose. You're safe. Eileen sobbed. They made me see things. Made me say things. They want to know what I dream. They say I carry the key. The key to what? Eric asked sharply. Eileen turned her head. The mirror gate, she whispered. It opens soon. They want the witches to break it for them. Rosamund froze. The mirror gate. An ancient seal. A legend among witches. Said to hold something older than even the Blood Court. Before they could ask more, Marin cursed. They triggered a silence tripwire. We're out of time. The walls trembled. A deep, throaty growl echoed through the safe house. Not vampire. Not witch. Something else. Move! Eric barked. He took Eileen in his arms and bolted through the collapsing corridor. Rosamund ran beside him, blasting a hole through a barricade with fire magic. Marin threw hex runes behind them that exploded in blinding bursts. A claw burst through the ceiling behind them, massive, skeletal, burning black flame. "What is that?" Rosamund yelled. "A blood-bound warden," Merrin snapped. "They bind it to guard their deepest secrets. It doesn't stop. It only devours." "Wonderful," Eric muttered. "I miss those." They reached the outside as the warden's roar shook the swamp. Merrin threw a rune behind her, an ancient detonation spell that lit the marsh in a blinding white burst. The ground split. The safe house cracked. And the creature's roar died with the stones. They set up a temporary warded camp deep in the forest miles from the ruins. Eileen slept, her breathing shallow but steady. Merrin stood watch. Eric sat near the fire, tending a gash on his arm. Rosamund sat across from him, arms around her knees. "That thing," she whispered. "What it was guarding?" Eric nodded. "The mirror gate." Rosamund looked at him. "If the vampires open it, what comes through?" Eric stared into the flames. "I don't know. But it won't be anything we're ready for."
Every tale you hear here leaves a mark on the world beyond. If this story stirred something in you, leave a like to weave your magic into ours. Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice spins a new thread in the arcane tapestry. And subscribe to our YouTube channel Arcane Stories, where myths breathe, shadows speak, and destinies awaken. The next legend is already waiting for you.